The stars were silent in the vastness of space, yet the calmness of the universe was deceptive. Far beyond the reaches of Earth, in a distant corner of the galaxy, a race of beings known as the Xylar prepared for a mission that would forever alter the fate of one small blue planet. To them, Earth was nothing more than a speck, insignificant, primitive, and unworthy of attention. They had conquered countless worlds, each more powerful than the last, and their empire stretched across the stars. But they didn't know the true strength of the one planet they were about to invade. The Xylar were ruthless conquerors, advanced beyond imagination. Their ships could travel through the vacuum of space faster than light. Their weapons could obliterate cities with a single shot, and their technology made them nearly invincible. They ruled with a cold, calculating efficiency, leaving no room for weakness. For centuries, they had moved from one galaxy to the next, crushing civilizations that stood in their way. No race had ever been able to oppose them, not until now. The leader of the Xylar, Warlord Xarvok, stood aboard his flagship, the Unyielding. The massive ship hovered near the edge of Earth's solar system, the dark expanse of space stretching out behind it. Xarvok's black eyes scanned the holographic map of Earth below. To him, it was a planet full of primitive life forms, easily manageable and ripe for conquest. He turned to his advisors. "Earth will fall like every other planet we have conquered," Xarvok said, his voice a low growl. "Their defenses are no match for our superior technology. Prepare the fleet. We strike at dawn." The Xylars had watched Earth for years, sending untraceable probes to observe their activities. They had seen the humans in their wars, their endless conflicts and divisions, but none of it concerned the Xylars. To them, Earth was like all other worlds, rife with disorder and weakness, ready to be claimed. They knew little of the human spirit, of what lay hidden beneath the surface of this chaotic world. As the Xylar fleet prepared for battle, the first signs of the invasion appeared. The humans, for the most part, had no idea what was coming. They had always been caught up in their own struggles, wars, politics, and the everyday challenges of survival. Earth was not united in the face of cosmic threats. It was a planet divided, struggling with its own survival in an ever-changing world. But there were those who saw the signs: high-ranking military officials, scientists, and a few individuals who had glimpsed the future began to prepare. But even they had no idea of the scale of what was coming. The invasion was swift. In the dead of night, the skies above Earth began to fill with strange lights, bright, flickering streaks across the sky, as if the stars themselves were being torn apart, and then the ships appeared. At first, the humans thought it was some sort of natural phenomenon, an asteroid storm, perhaps, or a new type of comet. But as the objects grew larger and moved faster, panic began to spread. It didn't take long for the world's military powers to realize that these were not natural phenomena. They were ships, massive and armed with destructive power. The Xylars had arrived. The world's military forces scrambled to respond, but they were too late. The Xylar ships entered Earth's atmosphere with terrifying speed. They were enormous, more than 3 times the size of any human-built warship. Their hulls were made of a material unknown to Earth, impervious to Earth's weaponry, and their weapons were unlike anything humanity had ever seen. Within moments, the first city was leveled. The attack was swift, precise, and utterly devastating. New York, once a bustling metropolis, was reduced to rubble in a single blast from a Xylar energy cannon. The buildings crumbled, the streets cracked open, and millions of lives were lost in an instant. The humans fought back, but their weapons were useless against the invaders. Nothing could pierce the Xylar's shields. Across the globe, similar attacks unfolded. The Xylar forces moved with deadly efficiency, disabling Earth's military communications and spreading terror everywhere they went. Cities fell one after another, and humanity found itself helpless against an enemy it couldn't even comprehend. There was no time to prepare. The invasion had begun. In the heart of the battle, General Lillian Hayes stood on the bridge of the Excalibur, one of Earth's few remaining warships. The destruction outside the viewports was unimaginable. The human forces were being overwhelmed, and her ship was one of the last bastions of hope. With every passing moment, more and more Xylar ships appeared in the sky, dropping bombs and launching devastating strikes. The air was thick with smoke, and the ground trembled with each explosion. "We're losing them," Lieutenant Carter said, his voice filled with fear. "The fleet is being decimated. They're too powerful. We can't stop them." General Hayes clenched her fists, her face set in determination. She had seen this before: earthquakes, storms, wars. Humanity had been through it all. But this was different. The enemy was unlike anything they had ever encountered. She knew the odds were against them. But one thing she understood deeply about humanity was this: they never gave up. In the face of impossible odds, they fought harder. "Hold your ground," she commanded, her voice firm. "This isn't over yet." But even she didn't know how humanity could win. They were under-equipped, unprepared, and outmatched. The Xylar's overwhelming technological advantage was evident. Their weapons could obliterate entire cities in seconds, and their shields made Earth's defenses useless. It seemed as though the Xylars were unstoppable. Across Earth, ordinary civilians, people who had no training in combat, no experience in war, were witnessing the unimaginable. People took to the streets in panic, running from the unknown invaders. Governments collapsed, and cities became nothing more than ruins. But in the midst of this chaos, something extraordinary began to happen. Humanity, despite their fear, began to fight back in small, clever ways. Resistance groups formed, first in the shadows, and then in the open. They used old technology, rusted weapons, makeshift explosives, and homemade drones, anything they could find. They sabotaged the invaders' machines, attacked their communication networks, and began to slow the Xylar invasion, if only for a moment. But the true shock came when the Xylars made a fatal mistake. They underestimated the human spirit. While they were obsessed with destroying cities and decimating humanity's military forces, they failed to recognize the one thing that made humans dangerous: their ability to adapt, to survive. The humans had no chance of defeating the Xylars in a straight-up fight. But what the invaders didn't realize was that humanity wasn't going to fight like any enemy they had ever faced. The Xylars were used to defeating their enemies with overwhelming force, but the humans were not so easily crushed. They fought not for territory or power, but for survival, and that made them unpredictable. And so, in the midst of their arrogance, the Xylars failed to see the spark that was beginning to ignite on Earth. They thought they were the galaxy's most terrifying species, but humanity had something they would never understand: an unwavering will to survive and an ability to fight back, no matter the cost. As the first wave of destruction hit Earth's capital cities, humanity began to realize something incredible. They might be the most underestimated species in the galaxy, but their greatest strength lay in their refusal to surrender. The invasion had just begun, but the true battle, the one that would decide the fate of Earth, was about to unfold. The Xylars may have thought they were invincible, but what they didn't know was that Earth's greatest weapon was not its technology or its weapons. It was the very spirit of the human race, a force so powerful that it would soon prove to be the Xylars' worst nightmare. The first wave of the Xylar invasion had devastated Earth. Entire cities had been reduced to rubble in a matter of hours, and millions of lives were lost. The might of the Xylar warships, their devastating energy cannons, and impenetrable shields were overwhelming. Humanity had fought back with what little they had, but it had hardly made a dent in the Xylar forces. The battle seemed hopeless, and the invasion was on the verge of victory. But in the dark corners of the planet, something remarkable was beginning to stir. It was not the advanced military forces, with their outdated equipment and underwhelming firepower, that would turn the tide. It was the ordinary people of Earth, the ones who had no formal training in combat, but possessed something the exilers could never have prepared for: the human will to survive. General Lillian Hayes stood on the bridge of the Excalibur, the last operational warship in Earth's military fleet. The view outside was filled with chaos. Explosions, streaks of light, and the remains of the Earth's once proud cities. The human forces were stretched thin, and the world's governments were in disarray. The exilers had thought Earth's military would be their toughest challenge, but now, the survivors of the initial wave faced a new enemy: despair. Her face was grim as she stared out the viewport, watching the slow advance of the exiler fleet toward Earth's capital. She knew they couldn't keep up the fight for long. Earth's defenses had been shattered, and the alien invaders were growing stronger by the minute. But even in the face of hopelessness, Hayes didn't give up. She had seen humanity survive worse, and she knew it was capable of far more than anyone realized. "General, we're receiving a distress signal from the southern continent," Lieutenant Carter reported, his voice filled with urgency. "Patch it through," Hayes ordered, turning to face the communication console. The screen flickered before showing the image of a man standing amidst the destruction of what had once been a bustling city. "This is Commander James Rutherford," the man's voice crackled through the speaker. "We've set up a small resistance base in the ruins. We need reinforcements. The Tylers are hunting us down, but we've managed to hold our ground for now." The commander's face was smeared with dirt, and his eyes were bloodshot, but his voice carried the unmistakable weight of determination. Hayes knew this wasn't just a call for help. It was a sign that the human spirit was still alive. Despite all that had happened, people were still fighting, still resisting. "Commander Rutherford, hold your position. Reinforcements are coming," Hayes said, though she knew that sending reinforcements would take time. Time that Earth didn't have. The line went silent, and for a moment, General Hayes closed her eyes. How could they fight back against an enemy so powerful, so relentless? What hope did humanity have against the might of the exilers? But as she stood there, her thoughts started to shift. The exilers had underestimated one thing about humanity: their ability to adapt, to innovate, and to overcome. In the past, humanity had faced down wars, famine, and disease. Each time they were knocked down, they got back up stronger. And now, in the face of the exiler invasion, humanity was once again being tested. But this time, they had something more to fight for: each other. The unlikely resistance. The resistance movements spread like wildfire. What began as small, scattered pockets of survivors soon turned into a global movement. The Tylers had expected to crush Earth's military in days, but they had failed to account for the human ability to form alliances, to adapt in the face of adversity. In underground bunkers and abandoned buildings, people from all walks of life began to join forces. Scientists, engineers, teachers, and students all pitched in, creating makeshift weapons and devising clever tactics to strike at the invaders. While the Xylar weapons were far superior, humans began to find ways to use their own environment to their advantage. In the ruins of once thriving cities, the resistance used guerrilla tactics, setting traps and sabotage operations. They hacked into the Xylars' communication networks, sending false signals to confuse the invaders. They used drones and old military vehicles to carry out hit-and-run attacks, taking advantage of the Xylars' overconfidence. The war was no longer a battle of superior technology. It had become a fight for survival. One of the most significant victories came when a small band of resistance fighters managed to hijack a Xylar supply ship. The ship, loaded with crucial resources for the Xylar forces, was taken in a daring raid. The rebels used their newfound weapons to strike at the Xylar supply lines, severely damaging their ability to wage war. It was a small victory, but it sent a message to the Xylar. Humanity was not going to roll over and die. They were fighting back. "We've only just begun," Commander Rutherford said, standing before a map of the galaxy, marking key Xylar locations. The resistance was slowly gaining ground, and the message was spreading across Earth. Humanity had begun to fight back, and they would not be easily defeated. As more people joined the resistance, more resources became available. The human engineers, driven by desperation and the will to survive, began reverse engineering the technology that the Xylers had left behind. Weapons that had once seemed out of reach were now being used against the invaders. Humans had discovered that they could adapt and repurpose the very technology that had once threatened to wipe them out. In makeshift laboratories, brilliant minds worked day and night to create new devices, hacking tools, EMP bombs, energy disruptors, all built from scraps of alien technology and Earth's own resources. The Xylers, focused on their overwhelming firepower, had overlooked humanity's true strength, the ability to innovate and adapt faster than any enemy could predict. The moment of change. As the weeks passed, the human resistance grew stronger. Small victories, like disabling a few Xyler ships or saving a city from annihilation, began to add up. The people of Earth were learning to fight, and they were learning quickly. The global unity that had once been a distant dream had become a reality. People who had never known each other, people from different countries, backgrounds, and cultures, were now united under one cause: to defend Earth. General Hayes, who had once feared that humanity would crumble under the weight of the Xylers' invasion, began to see a different future. The resistance had taken a foothold, and for the first time since the invasion began, Earth's military forces were no longer retreating. They were fighting back, slowly but surely. In the heart of the rebellion, Commander Rutherford and his team had developed a plan, one that could change everything. They had learned of a hidden Xylar base on Earth, a place where the invaders were building more advanced weaponry, perhaps even a new class of warships. If they could strike there, they could cripple the Xylers' ability to continue their assault. The plan was risky, but it was humanity's best chance. Commander Rutherford gathered a team of the best soldiers and engineers to infiltrate the base. They would use their knowledge of the Xylers' technology to disable their weapon systems, stealing critical intelligence in the process. It was a dangerous mission, one that could end in failure, but the stakes were too high. The humans knew that if they didn't strike now, they might lose everything. A new hope. The battle to take down the Xylar base was fierce. The resistance fighters fought valiantly, outgunned and outnumbered, but determined to protect their home. The Xylar soldiers, once so confident, now found themselves pushed to the brink by humanity's resilience. As Rutherford and his team fought their way through the base, they encountered unexpected allies, other humans who had managed to infiltrate the enemy ranks, sabotaging Xylar operations from within. It was a turning point. The Xylers had never expected this level of resistance, and they were unprepared for the human ingenuity that was unfolding before them. The battle for the base ended with a resounding success. The Xylers' advanced weaponry was destroyed, and critical intelligence was secured. General Hayes, watching from the Excalibur, received the news with a sense of disbelief. The tide had turned. The humans had done the impossible. And for the first time since the invasion began, the Xylers were no longer certain of their victory. In the aftermath of the battle, a new hope blossomed. Earth was not lost. The resistance had shown that no matter the enemy, humanity would rise. They would not be crushed by fear, and they would never stop fighting for their survival. The Xylar invasion was far from over, but the humans had proven that they were capable of rising from the ashes. Humanity had faced an impossible threat, and yet they had found a way to fight back. The real battle was just beginning, and the Xylers, for the first time, understood what it meant to face the full force of humanity's defiance. The war was no longer about survival. It was about vengeance. Humanity had learned the harsh realities of an alien invasion, but in those harsh lessons, they had found their strength. The Xylers had underestimated them, expecting the small, fragile species from Earth to crumble before their overwhelming might. Instead, Earth's resistance had become a force that Xylers could no longer ignore. The first wave of the invasion had left the planet in ruins. Cities had fallen, and millions of lives had been lost in the blink of an eye. The Xylars' weapons had been devastating, capable of obliterating entire cities in moments. But what the invaders failed to realize was that their victory came at a cost. Humanity was no longer afraid. The fight was no longer about matching the Xylars in strength or firepower. Humanity had learned that they could not win a battle of brute force, but they could win with ingenuity, determination, and the ability to outthink their enemies. The first signs of this shift in strategy were already beginning to show as the resistance groups, scattered across the globe, united under a single banner. In the heart of the conflict, General Lillian Hayes stood aboard the Excalibur, overseeing the coordination of the global resistance. The once proud flagship of Earth's military had become a symbol of defiance. Its weapons, though modest compared to the Xylar warships, were now more than just tools of war. They were instruments of hope. The Excalibur had become the rallying point for every human that still had the will to fight. "We're ready," Lieutenant Carter said, his voice steady but tense as he approached General Hayes. "The resistance has been growing stronger. The Xylars are not prepared for what's coming next. We won't give them the chance to prepare," General Hayes replied, her eyes narrowing as she looked out into the endless stretch of space. "We have the element of surprise. We use that to our advantage." The humans had discovered a secret weapon, one that the Xylars had never seen coming. While the invaders had focused on attacking Earth's cities and military bases, they had failed to notice the true strength of humanity. Their resourcefulness. Humanity had been forced to scavenge, to build their own weapons from the scraps of destroyed Xylar ships, to learn from the alien technology they had managed to seize. Humanity's engineers and scientists had begun to reverse engineer the Xylar's advanced technology. From the wreckage of the Xylar fleet, they had built weapons capable of disabling the enemy's shields and breaking through their defenses. The first of these weapons, the EMP disruptor, had been tested successfully. It was a game changer. The EMP disruptor worked by emitting a high-frequency pulse that could incapacitate the Xylar's advanced shielding systems, rendering their warships vulnerable to attack. The humans knew that the Xylar had never faced an enemy capable of turning their own technology against them. This was humanity's advantage. They didn't need to match the Xylars in raw power. They just needed to outsmart them. The resistance, now armed with these new weapons, launched their first coordinated strike against a major Xylar stronghold. The target was the Xylar flagship, the Unyielding, the symbol of their empire's dominance. If humanity could bring down the Unyielding, it would send a message to the invaders. Earth would not be conquered. The plan was risky. It involved infiltrating the heart of the Xylar fleet, using stealth and precision to disable their command center. The human resistance knew that a direct assault would be suicide, so instead, they planned to strike with surgical precision, exploiting the vulnerabilities they had discovered in the Xylar's technology. The first strike. The mission was led by Commander James Rutherford, who had proven himself to be one of the most capable leaders in the resistance. His small team, composed of elite soldiers and engineers, had been tasked with infiltrating the Xylar flagship and planting a device that would disable its core systems. It was a dangerous mission, but one that could turn the tide of the war. The team boarded their small, agile strike ship, the Phantom, and entered Xylar-controlled space undetected. The plan was simple: approach the flagship, land on one of its lower decks, plant the device, and escape before the Xylars had a chance to respond. But they knew that even the slightest misstep could mean the end for them. The Phantom approached the Unyielding under the cover of darkness, using a field of debris from the wreckage of past battles to hide their presence. The humans had perfected the art of stealth, using their knowledge of Xylar technology to disable their sensors and slip past their defenses. As they neared the flagship, Rutherford's heart raced. He knew this was the moment that could change everything for humanity. "We're in position," Rutherford whispered into his comms as he looked out the viewport, seeing the enormous Xylar ship looming ahead. "Understood," replied Lieutenant Ava Simmons, the team's lead engineer. Once we're inside, we'll need to make it to the main power core. We don't have long." The Phantom made its approach, gliding silently toward the underbelly of the Unyielding. The Resistance team landed without incident, slipping out of the ship and into the belly of the enemy's flagship. They moved quickly, silently, through the corridors, avoiding detection by the Xylar guards. They had trained for this moment, and every step was deliberate, calculated. As they made their way deeper into the ship, the atmosphere grew tense. The Xylar ship was massive, filled with complex systems, and guarded by alien soldiers. But Rutherford's team was prepared. They had studied the ship's layout and knew exactly where to strike. Their objective was clear: disable the ship's core, knock out its energy systems, and create a diversion that would allow the human fleet to attack. They reached the central command room, where the Xylar's main energy reactor was housed. Simmons quickly set to work, planting the EMP disruptor at the core of the reactor, while Rutherford and the rest of the team held their position, ready for any counterattack. Just as Simmons activated the device, an alarm sounded. "We've been detected," shouted Sergeant Maria Diaz, one of the team's sharpshooters. "We need to get out of here now." Chaos erupted as the Xylar forces, now aware of the intrusion, flooded the corridors. The Resistance team fought back fiercely, using every ounce of training and every weapon they had at their disposal. The Xylar soldiers were formidable, but they were unprepared for the human speed and ingenuity. The humans used the aliens' own technology against them, triggering the EMP disruptor just as planned. The device sent out a pulse, disabling the Xylar's advanced shields and rendering their weapons useless. It was as if the entire ship had been thrown into chaos. The Xylar forces scrambled, confused and disoriented. But the Resistance didn't hesitate. They fought their way out, taking down enemy soldiers and fleeing to the escape route. The tides began to turn. The EMP disruptor had done its job. The Unyielding was crippled. The once mighty flagship, the heart of the Xylar fleet, was now vulnerable. The human fleet, led by the Excalibur, had been waiting for this moment. As soon as they received the signal from Rutherford's team, they launched their attack. The small but determined human warships charged forward, using the Xylar's weakness to their advantage. They fired their weapons with precision, targeting the crippled ship's weak points. The Xylar, caught off guard, struggled to regroup. Their once invincible ships, now rendered powerless by the EMP pulse, were torn apart in the ensuing battle. The humans fought with a fury they had never shown before. They were no longer fighting for survival alone. They were fighting for revenge. Every explosion, every fallen Xylar ship, was a symbol of humanity's defiance. General Hayes watched from the Excalibur as the battle unfolded before her. She could hardly believe her eyes. The human fleet was holding its own against the once feared Xylar warships. It was a victory that no one had thought possible just weeks earlier. "This is it," Hayes said, her voice steady. "We're turning the tide." The Xylars, who had thought they could conquer humanity with ease, were now on the defensive. Their fleet was crumbling, and their empire was beginning to unravel. Humanity had proved to the galaxy that they were not the weak, helpless species that Xylars had thought them to be. They were a force to be reckoned with. As the battle raged on, the humans knew that this was just the beginning. The Xylar fleet had been crippled, but there was still much to be done. The war was far from over, but humanity had made its mark. They had shown the Xylars that they would not be defeated, no matter the cost. The battle had been unleashed, and the Xylars would never be the same again. The Xylars had arrived with one purpose: to conquer Earth. They believed they were unstoppable, an advanced, nearly invincible species with fleets that spanned the stars. For centuries, they had crushed every enemy that dared to challenge them. But humanity had shown them that there was one thing that even the most advanced species in the galaxy had underestimated: the power of the human spirit. The war had been brutal, and Earth was in ruins. The Xylar fleet, with its enormous ships and weapons capable of obliterating entire cities, had reduced much of the planet to ash. Entire cities had been wiped off the map in a matter of hours, and the world's leaders had scrambled to coordinate the planet's defense. Despite the immense technological gap between the two species, humanity refused to bow to the Xylars. They fought back with what they had: innovation, resilience, and an unyielding will to survive. For weeks, humanity's resistance had been growing stronger. General Lillian Hayes had rallied Earth's surviving forces, organizing hit-and-run attacks, and using their knowledge of the Xylars' technology to exploit their weaknesses. The EMP disruptors, built from the wreckage of the Xylar ships, had been humanity's secret weapon. And now, after months of resistance, it was time for the final push. The battle had shifted in humanity's favor, but the war was far from over. The Xylar fleet, still formidable but vulnerable, had retreated to their stronghold in the outer reaches of the solar system. The humans had crippled their flagship, the Unyielding, and destroyed countless warships, but the invaders were not ready to give up just yet. Earth's fate still hung in the balance. The final assault. General Hayes stood on the bridge of the Excalibur, her face grim but filled with determination. The humans had suffered heavy losses, but they had also dealt crippling blows to the Xylar fleet. The Excalibur was one of the last remaining warships in Earth's fleet, and it was about to lead the final assault against the Xylars. "We've taken down their flagships, but they're still out there," Hayes said, her voice steady but filled with urgency. "The Xylars won't give up easily. We need to finish this." Her officers nodded in agreement. They had come this far, but the battle ahead would be their toughest yet. Humanity had no choice but to fight to the end. The Excalibur was joined by the remnants of the human fleet, smaller, less advanced ships, but they had something the Xylars didn't: the will to fight. The final assault was set to begin. Humanity had one goal: to cripple the Xylars' last stronghold, located on a massive asteroid base in the outer reaches of the solar system. The Xylars had fortified the base, using it as their final bastion of power. If humanity could take it down, the war would be over. If they failed, Earth would be lost. The fleet assembled, and the countdown began. The Xylars' asteroid base was heavily defended, surrounded by an array of automated weapons and armed warships. The humans knew that a direct assault would be suicide, so they devised a strategy: strike fast, strike hard, and use the chaos to their advantage. We move in fast, take down their defenses, and disable the base's power core. Once we've done that, we pull out, General Hayes instructed. This is it. No second chances. The Excalibur and its fleet moved into position, using every bit of stealth and cunning they had learned in their years of fighting the Xylars. They approached the asteroid base under the cover of space debris, their ships slipping past the Xylars' outer defenses unnoticed. As they neared the base, the Xylars' automated weapon systems activated, firing upon them with deadly precision. The humans fought back with everything they had. The battle in space was fierce. Xylar warships clashed with human ships, and explosions filled the void of space. The Excalibur led the charge, its weapons firing relentlessly as the humans tore through the Xylar defenses. Despite the overwhelming firepower of the Xylars, the human fleet refused to back down. Every soldier on board the Excalibur, every engineer, every pilot, fought with the knowledge that this would be their last stand. A daring infiltration. Commander James Rutherford, who had led the previous strikes against the Xylars, was once again leading a small team of elite soldiers on a mission to infiltrate the asteroid base. Their objective was simple: penetrate the Xylar stronghold, sabotage the base's power core, and plant the EMP disruptors. If they could disable the base's power, the humans would have a fighting chance to destroy the entire facility. Rutherford and his team boarded a stealth ship, the Phantom, and made their way through the debris field that surrounded the Xylar base. The asteroid was heavily guarded, but the humans had learned to use the element of surprise to their advantage. As they approached the base, they slipped past the Xylar's outer defenses, avoiding detection by staying out of range of the enemy scanners. "We're in position," Rutherford said, his voice low but steady. "We need to get inside before they realize we're here." The team infiltrated the base, moving quickly through the corridors. They had studied the layout of the asteroid base and knew exactly where to plant the EMP disruptors. But the Xylar had learned from their previous mistakes, and the base was heavily fortified. The closer they got to the power core, the more Xylar soldiers they encountered. The team fought their way through, using their advanced training and quick thinking to overcome the obstacles in their path. As they reached the power core, the final obstacle stood before them: the Xylar's elite guards. These soldiers were stronger, faster, and better equipped than the others. But Rutherford's team had something they didn't: human ingenuity. The humans used the Xylar's own technology against them, disabling their weapon systems and creating distractions to take down the guards. "Now, Simmons," Rutherford yelled to Lieutenant Eva Simmons, the team's lead engineer. She quickly set the EMP disruptors in place, and the device hummed to life. The countdown began. The moment of triumph. Back at the Excalibur, General Hayes watched the progress of the mission from the bridge. The battle raged on outside, but her focus was on the small team inside the asteroid base. The EMP disruptors were their last hope. If they could disable the power core, it would cripple the entire base and give the human fleet the upper hand. The countdown was ticking away. 30 seconds, Lieutenant Carter said, his eyes glued to the control panel. "We're almost there." The tension was palpable. The fate of Earth rested on the success of this mission. If they failed, the Xylars would strike back with renewed force. But if they succeeded, it would be the turning point in the war. The countdown reached its final seconds. 10, 9, 8. Carter counted down. The sound of the ticking clock was the only thing that filled the silence. Then, a flash of light. The power core of the asteroid base went dark. The EMP disruptors had done their job. The entire facility went into chaos as the Xylar's advanced systems failed. The humans had succeeded. "Now," Rutherford shouted to his team. They quickly made their way to the extraction point, using the cover of the confusion to slip past the remaining Xylar forces. As they escaped the base and boarded the Phantom, the Excalibur moved in for the final assault. The weakened Xylar defenses were no match for the human fleet, now fully empowered by their victory. The Xylar warships were quickly overwhelmed, their shields powerless against the humans' relentless attacks. Within hours, the Xylar's asteroid base was destroyed, and the human fleet had secured a decisive victory. A new era, the battle for Earth, was over. As the Xylar forces retreated, General Hayes stood on the bridge of the Excalibur, looking out at the debris-filled space around her. Earth had been scared, its cities shattered, but humanity had triumphed. The invaders had been defeated, and for the first time in history, a species that had once been thought of as weak had stood up to the galaxy's most powerful empire and won. The human resistance, once a small and scattered group, had become the backbone of a new Earth. People from all nations, all cultures, had come together to fight as one. They had proven that no matter how advanced an enemy may be, the human spirit could never be extinguished. As the Excalibur sailed through the stars, Hayes addressed the crew. "We may be small, but we've proven that we can take on the universe. Today, humanity has shown the galaxy that we are not to be underestimated. This is just the beginning." And with that, Earth's legacy was sealed. They had faced the unimaginable and had emerged victorious, not because they were the most powerful, but because they refused to give up. Humanity had proven that they were the most terrifying species in the galaxy.